Welcome back to another weather update, guys. I'm meteorologist Tucker Antico, breaking down the forecast you need to know over the next week. And in this week of weather, we have a lot of exciting news if you like snow, and for some of you guys, exciting news if you like spring. But the focus in this forecast, if you can't tell by the snowfall map next to me, is going to be on a train of winter storms that's really going to dump some heavy snow on much of the country. We're talking about how much snow will fall, when it's going to fall, and looking ahead at storms that you're probably not hearing anywhere else yet. So stick around as we jump into this busy and fun week of weather. As we get into this forecast, I just wanted to remind you to subscribe if you haven't already and ask any questions you have in the comments. I'm happy to give you a personal forecast, so don't be shy. Let's show you the numbers though, and if you look off to the right of me, you're seeing some big numbers, big colors more or less, on our map here. And I'll tell you what we're looking at here in the west is a very active pattern. Anywhere you're seeing those orange colors and even whitish yellow colors, that's some big time snow that's expected over the next 2 weeks in some of the mountains out there. So we're talking the Rockies and Sierra Nevadas. Some of the numbers here, you can tell for yourself, up to 100 inches over the next 2 weeks will fall out there as the pattern stays active, moving on shore. Not as much snow in the north and central U.S., especially where it will be comparatively drier. But if you look off to the east and especially the northeast, you're seeing some of those big numbers emerge again as our pattern will stay very active and bringing storms up a corridor that'll continue to dump snow in that part of the region. This is the European model. Thought I'd show you the American model here too. Similar story, perhaps a little bit more in the central U.S. Just depends on our storm track, and we're going to get into that here in our forecast. But regardless, this will be good for the mountains out west and very good for the east, especially the northeast, as we go through the next 2 weeks into the middle and later days of February. But of course, I always want you to know that this is a legitimate forecast. We're not just looking at numbers and talking about what the data sees. So instead, let me show you some of the science behind this. And what you're looking at here is the upper level air masses. We have two things really at play here. The biggest is this ridge, which is sort of in the south now, but it's going to skirt up the east coast like this. And that's sort of a guide, a side rail, we'll call it, for our storms. And as the storms come in, you're going to see them bump up against the side rail and ride into the northeast. So let me move this forward. You'll see what I'm talking about here. There's our ridge in the southeast. Each one of these little bubbles you see go through, like this guy here and this guy here, those are our storms that are going to be sliding through one after another. And what you're noticing is this pattern show up where we have this ridge out east and we have some waves of energy coming down out of the north and sweeping across the U.S. like that. Now, the thing that we need to really narrow down into each of these forecasts is how far can the cold air push up against the milder air over the east. And that's going to determine where a lot of these complex storms end up in terms of rain and snow. But if I move this forward, you can see that pattern continues for a while. I mean, we're looking at February 20th, and we're still seeing a similar pattern before things begin to change a bit later in the month. But let's take a closer look at some of the storms on the way, and we'll talk about how much snow you can expect. And if you live anywhere in the east especially, this is going to get pretty exciting for you. Taking a look at the start of our week, our weather is quiet for a short time, but as soon as Tuesday, things get busier. You're seeing our first storm emerge here, bringing rain to the south and some snow to the east as soon as Tuesday, but this thing really blows up a lot more. And as we move into Tuesday, later in the day especially, you're seeing a good mix of ice and snow take over the mid-Atlantic, and this is going to be reasonably far south, so places like Virginia, maybe some of the jackpots out here. But at the same time, we have another guy emerging off the Rockies, and this is going to follow up in short order moving up to the northeast. So we're looking at Tuesday right here, but as we move into Wednesday, there's one and the other. Two systems back to back. This second system will bring some ice to portions of the northeast and some snow, at least to the interior, but it's a tricky one because there are a lot of pieces of energy included in this storm. So what you're looking at is two different lows. We have one that's going to cut inland, one that's going to cut closer to the water. How this shakes out, I'll be honest, it's hard to say right now, so you'll want to stay tuned as we update you a little bit later on here. But what I can tell you is that there will be a mess of precipitation, rain, ice, and snow in the northeast Wednesday and Thursday this week before we finally see a short break. But, I mean, there really isn't a break because we see our next storm move on shore here as we move into Thursday and Friday out in the west. So a ton of rain coming to places like the West Coast and snow to the Rockies. And this system is going to be our next one that traverses across the country and brings snow to many. So into February, this is Valentine's Day, in fact, 14th, you see that snow out there in the west, and our system continues to move into the east, and this could be a very impactful one. Potential for strong, even severe storms in the southeast as we get into the weekend of the 15th and 16th. We're talking about potential snow on the interior, if not the coastline as well this weekend. And one of the question marks will be, how far does this mixing line make it to the water? Right now, I believe models are showing it a little too far inland. So the coast, I would not rule out on the potential for some big snow out of this too, but interior areas certainly looking good for this, and you can just tell how big and messy this storm system is going to be, impacting the entire East Coast at once. So we're just going to start there. We're going to leave it there actually for now and take a closer look at our storms that are coming in. But actually, you know what? I'll give you a sneak peek, because why not? Notch this guy out here in the Northwest. I'm excited about the active weather and snow, and you can see this ends up becoming our next storm system, and our weather pattern stays very active as far as the eye can see. But let's jump into those two systems I showed you and take a closer look. Again, here's our Tuesday storm system, and what you're seeing is that mixing line sort of centered here through Kentucky. We're going to have snow mainly north of that, and as this moves into Tuesday, actually Tuesday morning we see that snow begin, but especially Tuesday afternoon, you see some of this snow spread onto the mid-Atlantic. It becomes a little bit stronger here. Virginia is certainly looking at a good snow. D.C. should be looking at a good snow. North Carolina, we may see some ice along the Appalachian Mountains, so we will need to keep a close eye on that part of the forecast too. As we get into early Wednesday, this storm begins to move on and out, but you can still see here northern Virginia through D.C. into New Jersey, southern Pennsylvania. That's a good snowfall, and there's our ice here. What happens is you can get cold air that basically gets wedged up against the mountains, and that's how you get some of your big ice events. We call it cold air damming. Once that moves out, it's going to be Wednesday morning, midday, and we'll be looking at what is at least a few hours of quiet weather before that next storm comes in. But before that next storm comes in, let's show you some of the amounts we're expecting in terms of snow and ice. And here's your snowfall. These are conservative amounts, by the way, so I would expect even a little bit more than what you're seeing here. Those purple colors, that's where we may see, I believe we're going to see somewhere in the order of 6 to possibly up to 10 inches. Again, that's largely through Virginia into the D.C. area. Anywhere you're seeing these darker blue colors, that looks reasonable for a 3 to 6 inch snowfall for me. And that's a pretty broad area from northern Kentucky into southern Jersey. Those light blue colors, that's where you see lesser amounts. But again, this is just one system out of two on the way. We can also take a look at ice, though, because this is a concern. And we could have a pretty significant icing event here along the Appalachian Mountains. So western North Carolina, western Virginia, and West Virginia. You have to be on watch Tuesday afternoon through Wednesday morning. Let's take a look at system number 2 now. Picking up where we left off, there's our storm skirting to the south here on your Tuesday, Wednesday, so I wouldn't expect much snow in the Northeast, but things change on Thursday, of course. Our next system begins to arrive. This is now overnight into Thursday morning. You're seeing even more ice potentially across the Appalachian Mountains to the south. That's Virginia, West Virginia, but even into Pennsylvania. Should be another pretty significant sleet and ice event. We've already seen a few out here, so you know what to expect if you live in that area. And then that snow, it really begins to emerge here in two different spots because we have two separate storm cores. The first one maybe skirting a bit farther inland here, could just brush portions of northern New England. And then we got this guy here, which could bring some snow to most of the area Thursday morning. But once we get into the day, that should transition to rain along our coastal areas. May end up being a pretty good snow, though, if you're on the interior. And you'll see this here begin to play out heading through the day. Thursday, some snow, some ice, some rain, and there certainly is the potential for some ice out here in southern New England and portions of the coastal regions as well. But by the time we get to the end of Thursday, it's out. So this one moves pretty quickly. And in terms of amounts with this, you can see out here, we're talking about snowfall that will be pretty good to the south. And then on Thursday, there's our snow moving into this region. Again, conservative numbers here. This could be a really good storm that may just graze some of the interior regions of New England. Certainly up to double-digit amounts as possible. But for most of the Northeast, this includes Pennsylvania through southern New England, we're talking about amounts that'll be a little bit lower because it's a fast-moving storm and temperatures are going to cause some mixing. So I wouldn't be shocked. This is an early estimate, so be sure to check back for updates. But I wouldn't be shocked if we're looking at something on the order of 2 to 4 inches, and then we could see 4 to 8, if not a little bit more, in some of the mountains. But of course, some of that will melt before the end of the day, so it's not necessarily going to stick around super long, at least not all of that. In terms of ice, pretty good signal that it's going to be at least slippery out there. You can see a good signal for ice in Pennsylvania and a weaker signal through the rest of New England, but enough so that you really need to be careful Thursday, especially if you have anywhere to go, because that ice is going to be enough, even just a little bit, to cause some slick conditions. Hey, as always, happy to have you here. Hopefully you got a little bit out of the forecast, and if you have any questions, as mentioned, always drop them in the comments. Be sure to like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And you better believe we'll be back here with an update. So make sure to check back, and we'll be answering any questions, potentially live one of the days this week. So if you're curious, be sure to look back for that as well. Until next time, stay warm, enjoy the snow.